You ever notice how some conversations suddenly turn into a courtroom? I mean, not an actual courtroom, but somehow you're presenting evidence. You're explaining what you meant, you're clarifying your intentions, you're adding context. And the entire time you're thinking, if I could just explain it in the right way, they would absolutely understand. So you keep talking. You adjust the wording, you adjust the tone, you try another angle, and 10 minutes later, something strange happens. The issue you originally brought up isn't even the topic anymore. The topic is whether you were allowed to bring it up at all. And somewhere in that shift, explaining quietly turns into defending. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Most of these moments, they start small. You say something simple. You bring up a boundary, you question something, you point out that something just did not sit right with you. And you're not attacking anyone, you're just being clear. And the response that you get back has a certain energy. Maybe they question it. Maybe they push back. Maybe they respond in a way that subtly suggests you're the problem. And almost immediately, you feel yourself start to explain. And not because you're confused, not because you don't know what you meant, but because something in the response made it feel like you needed to. Like the original sentence suddenly wasn't enough on its own. Like it needed backup or support. And that shift happens so fast. You don't really think about it. You just feel yourself start to fill in the gaps, even if there weren't any to begin with. Like, well, what I meant to say was, or no, let me just explain. Oh, no, the reason I said that was, and right there, that's, that's where it starts. Now, explaining something once makes sense, but this is where it shifts. You don't just explain it once, you explain it again, and then again, and then again, each time trying to make it land better, clearer, more reasonable, more fair. You had examples, you had context, you explain your intentions. And it's not that you're just explaining more, it's that you're getting further away from how simply you meant it in the first place. The first version was usually the clearest, but every version after that gets a little bit more careful, a little bit more filtered, a little bit more shaped around how it's being received, until eventually you're not even saying it the way you originally felt it. You're saying it in a way that's easier to accept. And slowly, the conversation drifts, not toward a resolution, toward evaluation. You're not just sharing a point, you're defending your right to have it. And this doesn't come from insecurity the way that people think it does. It usually comes from trying to be fair. You don't want to be misunderstood. You don't want someone to walk away with the wrong impression of you. So your brain goes, hold on one second. Let me just clarify that part. Let me just add one more detail. Let me make sure they get what I meant. But every extra explanation does something subtle. It changes the dynamic. You're no longer expressing something, you're trying to get it accepted. And underneath it all, there's this one sentence that's usually running in the background. If I could just be better at explaining it, they'd understand. And that thought feels incredibly reasonable. It feels like you're being mature. It feels like you're doing the right thing, but it assumes something that isn't always true. It assumes that they're confused. And a lot of the time, they're not confused. They understand you perfectly. They just don't agree. Most of us have been trained to justify ourselves. Teachers asked why, parents asked why, authority figures asked why. So we got used to explaining, to providing reasoning, to making our decisions make sense to someone else. But at some point, that carries into places that it does not need to go. Not every statement needs to be defended. Not every decision needs to be approved. And once you start noticing that, you stop automatically stepping into the role. There's a moment in these conversations that's really easy to miss. It's right after you've already explained everything once. And you were clear. You said what you meant and you stood on your business. And the other person comes back at you with something like, yeah, but still, oh, I just don't see why. And this really doesn't make any sense to me. And you can feel it, the pull to go back in and try to explain it again. And that's the moment. Because if it was clear the first time, you're not clearing anything up anymore. You're just staying in the loop. So in real time, it looks like this. You feel yourself about to explain it again, but instead of going into another paragraph, you pause and check in with yourself. Was that unclear or just unwelcome? If it was clear, you don't add more, you don't stretch it, you don't try to make it land any better. You hold the original point. That's what I meant. That is the decision. And then you leave it there. There is nothing wrong with explaining yourself. Sometimes context absolutely matters. And most of the time, the conversation didn't need more explanation. It needed a stopping point. But if you're so used to explaining, stopping can feel absolutely incomplete. It can feel like you didn't finish your thought, when really, you already did. But explanation is supposed to support clarity, not replace confidence. If you've said something clearly once, you've already done your part. They can disagree, they can not like it, they can wish you handled it differently. Those are all things that are allowed, but you don't need to keep proving your position. Sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do in a conversation is recognize when the explanation is complete and leave it there. Because clarity doesn't require endless explanation. And once you trust that, conversations feel a lot lighter.